Welcome, everyone. This is People Are the Worst, the show where leadership meets reality, because navigating people and people problems isn't just part of the job, it is the job. Join us today as we tackle the messy, the maddening, and the downright ridiculous and explore how to lead through it all with clarity, courage, and maybe some caffeine. I'm Lucy.
And I'm Lindsey. And today we're going to discuss how to help a direct report with performance issues who won't take feedback, awkward feedback conversations, and career development in the land of no promotions.
Yes, and this is our first episode, which we're really excited to record. I'm in Miami and Lindsey's in Boulder, so I'm really sad that we're not together in person.
I know. It'd be so much more fun.
It'd be so much more fun. Okay, next time we're together, we're going to record one properly in person.
Love it.
Okay, so let's get started. So we have had a great question from Laura, who shared this tea with us this week. And so here is the scenario. So Laura is a manager and she's got this direct report, and there have been performance issues for a few months, which is totally brutal. And they've had extensive feedback discussions, like time and time again. And with examples, she's put together improvement plans for this person. And at times, this employee will say that they understand and make improvements. And other times, they will tell Laura that this is like the first time that they've heard any of this that she shared. And then they will fall back into old habits again. So there seems to be like a little bit of improvement and then they fall back off again. So when Laura sees this improvement, she's very diligent about letting them know what's going well. But there have been some performance issues. And basically, she feels like she's just revisiting them all the time and coming back to the same conversations again and again. And then she just feels like she's back to square one. So what can we do here? What's some good advice that we can give Laura?
Oh, geez. Well, first of all, I just feel for Laura. And also, you know that, what is that quote? It's like the definition of insanity is when you do the same thing over and over again, but you expect different results.
Exactly.
So it feels like here, as frustrating as it may be, like we've got to change our tactic because otherwise, we're going to see a little bit of improvement. We're going to think, oh my goodness, it's changing. And then all of a sudden we're going to slip back.
Right.
So I think first, we got to make sure that Laura, we got to check in and see if she's actually sort of had kind of this, like, let's step back for a second and see if she's had the conversation about sort of, I'm noticing these patterns.
Yeah.
But if not, then I think like we got to get to the bottom of this. Like something's up, right? That we're not talking about. Like these are symptoms.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd just encourage Laura to be like, to pull her direct aside and be like, listen, I really want to see you be successful, but I am hitting my head against the wall. Can we chat? And, at some point they'll say yes, right? And carve out some time and just say, listen, like, I feel like I give you feedback and sometimes I see great improvement and I get so excited. And then other times I give you feedback and in my mind, I've given you the feedback before, but I hear you say, this is the first time I'm hearing it. And you end up repeating some of the things we've already talked about. And so I'm at a loss. Can you help me understand, like, what's going on from your perspective? Like, is there something up that I'm just not clued into?
Right.
And I think like we just got to get to the bottom of it because otherwise, I mean, this tape is just going to keep playing.
Keep replaying.
Yeah. I'm like, oh man.
No,
it's like fun to watch,
No.
Nevertheless be a part of.
Totally. And I think that kind of that meta conversation, I think managers I see have a tendency to kind of to jump back in and think that maybe they haven't been clear and they'll try and put it a slightly different way or they'll repeat the feedback again. And it's just like, no. We've got to change up how we're thinking about this. And actually the feedback conversation from what you've said sounds like it goes from being like the actual feedback itself to like pulling up a few thousand feet and being like, hold on, let's have a feedback conversation about the patterns of behavior that we're seeing, so that folks can like get to the underlying issue, as you say. And I think Yeah, and I think that there's another piece of this, which is what I found in my coaching a lot, is that when you see that pattern of people having to have feedback repeated to them, but then they don't change their behavior, or at least that behavior is not sustained in any major way, that's kind of like a great red flag that shows you that there's this kind of underlying competing commitment that's going on there. There's something else underneath this pattern of behavior that you're seeing, which is preventing them sustaining the new behaviors that you'd like to see. And sometimes these competing commitments can be they can be quite profound. They can be, in Laura's case, she may find that this direct report thinks that that this is beneath them, the task that she's asking them to do differently. Like, I feel like this is beneath me. I'm too overeducated for this. Like, why am I doing that? But you say yes, and you agree in the moment, and you make some slight changes, but then nothing really, really changes. Sometimes people, I found a lot of time people have, especially if they're very sweet people, they have this commitment that they really must help if someone asks. And that just wrecks their time management entirely and their ability to get to the high impact work. And they continuously get feedback that they're not getting to it, or they're not spending enough time on things, but it's because other people keep asking them for stuff and they cannot say no. And so that competing commitment that, I need to get on with my job, but I must help if someone asks, always wins the day. Then you get landed with having just a complete shit show with your time and not being able to get to those high impact things.
Yeah, brilliant. But yeah, I love that, right? There's always something underneath it all. And sometimes you just gotta call out that pattern to try to understand what's beneath the surface, right? So nice. Oh, Lucy, this is funny. So this week, changing gears, still around feedback, but a little bit of a lighter situation. So I'm speaking with a client who's head of HR somewhere. And she's like, oh, we were talking about feedback. And she's like, oh, you wouldn't believe this. She's like, I didn't think that I'd be back in this, or I didn't think I'd ever run into this situation. But someone in the office, is complaining about someone eats tuna fish at lunch. It smells. And I was like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe this. I remember 20 years ago now, being in the office, all in a bunch of cubicles. And there was this guy who couldn't have been nicer, but come 12 o'clock, he gets out his tuna fish and we're all like, oh no, it's tuna fish hour. And we're all talking about it. No one's saying anything to him.
So what did you do back in the day? What did you say?
Totally. What's so funny is you realize, part of me was like, oh, I'm in a different part of my life now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because my coaching to this woman, right, was very different than when I did it, I don't know, said 25 or something like that. Because at the time I was like, oh no, I can't say anything, right? I don't want to upset him. I don't want to, and you're like, okay, wait, we're talking about tuna fish here. This is not someone who's worked so hard on something, but you think it's a bunch of crap, or it's about their kid or whatever. This is not a sensitive issue. It's tuna fish. Well, I said nothing at the time, I wish what I had done was just pulled Dave aside and been like, Dave, I love that you love tuna fish. Turns out tuna fish is really smelly. We have no office walls here. So we're all eating your tuna fish. I got a favor. Can you just have lunch outside when you have your tuna fish day? And I'm sure, no doubt, he would have been like, oh yeah, totally, my bad, right? But instead we're all talking about the tuna fish. Suffering through it. I mean, there's a big office with you cubicle after cubicle. And you're just oh my gosh, tuna fish. It's Tuesday tuna fish, Anyway, I had a good chuckle.
It turns out actually that's a great point, that the kind of your levity in that moment is what would have got you through that conversation. Because when things are not that big a deal, use humor.
Totally. But they seem so awkward. You're well, I can't say anything, and you're well, actually, you can. We're talking about tuna fish here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You absolutely can say something.
Yeah. Totally.
So anyway, I had
at WeWork as well. I often go and work at the WeWork just to get myself out of the house and in a different environment. And there inevitably is somebody that's brought the leftovers from their dinner in the next day, and they pop it in the microwave. And it's a huge open space. And it's oh my goodness, you cannot microwave fish in an open plan office with a bunch of strangers.
I did not know this.
Probably not necessary for me to give that person feedback on that. But anyway.
I don't know, Liz. I don't know.
People are the worst. They're the worst. Okay, well, let's look at the next kind of scenario we have here. And Ashley wrote to us, and she said that she has these two team members still we're still on the theme of feedback here because these tough conversations are so awkward to have. And here's another like great example of like a work one that's not as awkward as the tuna fish, but isn't like a performance related one, but it feels petty in the moment. And you're like, should I bother saying something? Does it matter? Yeah, it kind of does, but I don't know how to put it. So she basically has got two team members that she has on her team. And they always turn their cameras on for one-on-ones, but then they never have them on for team meetings, which is awkward, right? It's really awkward. And so they're basically the only two folks on the team with their cameras off. Should she care? Like, should she bring it up? Is there a way to bring it up?
Yeah. It's so interesting. People are just so fascinating. You're like, but why? Like, why wouldn't you have your camera on, right? And then you make these assumptions that like you don't feel comfortable in a group setting when the reality is like, I don't know, maybe it's their lunchtime and they're not going to like eat in front of people, or maybe, who knows? We have no idea. So you just got to go figure it out. But I don't know. What do you think? What are you going to tell Ash?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's always a nice way to have these conversations. And kind of with the tuna fish example, there's a way of just bringing in just a little bit of levity so that it's not this like great big like sit down feedback discussion, which feels all like major when it's not at all. So maybe something like, look, I've noticed that you don't have your camera on for team meetings, but you do for our one-on-ones. And I wanted to mention this because it makes the team meeting feel a little awkward. And I'm worried that the other team members might perceive this as a lack of interest in the meeting. It's really lovely to see your face, as it feels like more of a community when we can all see each other. Would you mind turning your camera on for all of our team meetings? How do you feel about that?
Nice. Yeah. Or even you don't even probably have to make the ask in that situation. I bet you could just say, what are your thoughts on what I just shared? And I bet we should I want to follow up with Ashley and find out what happened. But I bet those people they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't really even realize that. Here's the deal. It turns out like that's when I normally have my lunch, or like we've got this contractor in our house right now and that's when they're always doing this. And so I didn't want to be distracting. I'm sure there's something there.
Yeah.
That just when we open, just when we ask the question, like, what are your thoughts? Like it gives them room. And you can learn a lot. So like, I bet it'll even resolve itself out, and then if not, right. If they're like, oh, well, I kind of like this. And then I think there's absolute room to be like, you know what? I get that. And I hear you. And I'd really appreciate it if you don't mind just keeping your camera on. I think it'd mean a lot to me and the team. Cool.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think it also brings in a kind of larger meta question in a way of like, have you set yourself some team norms up front? Because sometimes setting these kinds of things, and you don't have to create these all on your own. You can create these together as a team, which is like, what are the behaviors that we're going to live by? How are we going to show up together as a group? How are we going to treat each other as a group? And you can get as granular as like, well, with team meetings, we all have our cameras on. And you can have that discussion. Do you mind if people are eating with their cameras on? No. Okay, great. Well, then if it's around lunchtime, maybe a few of us will have our lunch with us. Right. Those kinds of team norms, or, if we're going to put all of these types of communications in Slack, but we put these kind of communications in email, and just sort of having those and everybody being aware of them and agreeing on them can help nip a lot of these kind of what feel like petty but really important things in the bud before they become a problem. And then you feel like you've got to sit down and have this great big feedback conversation as a result.
Yeah. Great tip. The only thing I would say is like, I have found sometimes, though, when it is just like a one-off issue, don't try to solve it through the whole team, because everybody knows, like, totally see through it, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm on calls and people are like, oh, I feel like we really need to, I don't know, run some training or some workshops. We're just not having the tough conversations. You know what I mean? Then you dig deep and you're like, wait a second.
It's just one person.
There's two people who are not giving feedback to each other, whatever. You're like, okay, like, let's not... what are we doing here? Like, let's actually solve the problem that is the problem. You know what I mean? And not right. Like, anyway, but yes, norms are, I'm a huge fan of norms. So you know that. So great suggestion. Cool.
All right. Well, so we've kind of covered some good feedback, tough conversations. If you yourselves have had any tough conversations that you'd like us to help you wrangle, then please do let us know, and we will give you a place to put those questions later on at the end of the podcast today. But we've got our sort of last question that we want to dig into, and that is this scenario with Jason. Now, Jason is in a startup where, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. If you're in a startup with quite a flat structure, and he really wants to have a conversation with his team about their careers, but there's actually nowhere to go. There's nowhere for them to be promoted to other than to have his job. And there's a little bit of lateral movement, but not really. The team's small, they're growing, they're just starting out. Sometimes we've had folks in really large organizations who find themselves in exactly the same position, which is, how do you have career conversations in the absence of the ability to promote, in the absence of like upward mobility? How does he really talk to his team and make them feel like they've been being cared for, make them feel like they have career growth in the absence of being able to promote them? What should he do? How should he have these kinds of careers conversations authentically?
Yeah, I feel like this comes up all the time.
Yeah, totally.
Jason, you're not alone. Yeah, so interesting here. I mean, I would say what I have found too is like, whether big or small, right? There's always work to be done.
Yeah.
So there are so many more opportunities at play than we often allow ourselves to see, right? We kind of get our like tunnel vision on. And I would say, one of the benefits, the beautiful things of startup life. So I guess, Jason, like the good news is that the reality is, and I'm sure he can feel this, that there is plenty of work to be done, right? Like there's plenty, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And never enough people, right? And so, the challenge though, of course, is like there just isn't documented career structures and career pathing and competencies. Like, no way, not a chance.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with that? And I think for Jason, for his direct reports, I think the most beneficial thing he can do, because he actually has tons of opportunities to give them career developing experiences, is he's got to figure out, what do they really want to do? Yeah. And I think the way to do this really is like, I think the best way to do this is to start far out in the future for a couple of reasons. One is like, it just shows up as more genuinely curious about their career, right? You're like, you can go to lunch if you live in the same town. If not, right? Like, hey, during, let's carve out some time on a one-on-one and like not talk tactics. Let's just like carve out some space to kind of check in. And like, I really want to know how you're doing and like, what's important to you right now. And you could just say, hey, I'm curious, like even 5 years out. I mean, it depends on size, a company and how old they are. Like 10 might be too far out, but what have you, right? Like, how do you want to spend your time? Like when you just think 5 years out, like what are you up to? Are you in this industry? Like, and then the idea is you just kind of like, you listen, right? And you're going to learn something. Like you're going to learn a lot about who they are and what motivates them. And, and then you get to dig in a little bit. You're like, oh my gosh, that's so fascinating. Like, where does that come from? It turns out like you grew up in a family where like, that's what his mom did or what have you, right? And so then you kind of walk it back. And you're not saying like, what job title do you want, right? You're more like, well, what experiences do you want to have?
Yeah.
And then, even if we get like in the next 6 months out, what experience would you want to have? What would you need, So just to make this more real, let's just think of an example, right? So let's say he's out to lunch or on a call, what have you, on Zoom. And it's like, hey, I'd love to know, like, I'm just like, let's just have fun with this. It's Friday. Think out in the future, 5, 7 years. Where do you want to be? What do you want to be up to? And let's say his direct report's like, you know what? I've always wanted to start my own thing. Oh, it's awesome. Where's that come from? Story, right? It's so interesting. Okay, cool. So let's walk that back. Like, what do you think in order to have that job? Like, what feels really different from what you do now? Like, what are the skills you'd have to eventually develop, right?
Yeah.
And, okay, you want to start your own thing? He's like, well, I'm going to have to raise money, right? Which like, okay, yeah. And like, let's think about the skills there. Well, I've got to be able to make presentations, right? And so then you walk that back and you're like, okay, well, we know you need presentation skills. So let's bring it now to real time, right? Like, I don't know, next 6 months, like, what do you think you could do to help develop your presentation skills? And if they don't even have an answer for that, I think this is where like, you can be creative right here. It's like, okay, well, we have a team meeting every month that I have to run, right? I would love some support in that to give you the experience too of, just being in front of the room and making sure to get everybody airtime and to facilitate that conversation. So why don't we just plan ahead of time? We'll map out the calendar and we'll figure out like, I don't know, maybe there's a section of the team agenda that you facilitate. And then we'll block out 5 minutes right after the team meeting every time. And I'll tell you what you did well and where you could improve. Would that help? And so right there, right? Like Jason just got something off his list, right?
Right.
And this person feels like, oh wow, this person really cares about me. They care about like what I want to do in my life, and they're willing to develop me. So I don't know, I feel like there's more opportunity than people can see for themselves, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay, so this is just to summarize for our listeners what you said. There's basically a few different pieces in there, but essentially what you're doing is you're finding out about their careers themselves,
Mhm.
and you're in that conversation, you're starting far out in the future, and you're walking back the timeline to the present day so that you can find skills and things that they'd like to develop. And then you're looking for opportunities within your business, within the team, maybe cross-functionally, to be able to give them those skills, whether they're presentation skills or leadership skills or whatever that might look like, that they can then practice. So although there's no sort of promotion area for them, by having a career conversation and then finding opportunities for those skills, you can kind of really develop your people within these environments.
Totally. I think the one thing I probably should put a finer point on too, like the why behind you start out in the future, right?
Yeah.
That promotion trap that you don't have, right? Which always prevents us from having these conversations at all, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, if you're like, oh, where do you want to be in the next year or 2 years? You have just put that person in a box where like, you're kind of forcing them to say like, well, I really want to, because they don't want to be left out, right? Like, well, I would love that. I'd really love to be promoted. I'd like management experience. Like, but you don't really understand like what's driving that, right? Because you haven't figured out what they really want to do in their life. And you haven't really given them the permission to say that to you, because you haven't asked the question with enough distance between the now and what they're going to think you want to hear and their own reality. And so it's like, I think it's just absolutely critical that you start far out in the future, and they can get deer in headlights and you just walk it in. Right. But I think I think that's what people get hung up on, or that's sort of the unlock to make sure you don't just get in that situation like, well, I really want to get promoted. And you're like, well, right now, with the current business, like growth rate, and you're just like, why did I have this conversation? Like,
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can also help people not get too hung up on titles. If they're trying to give you like a job title, you can say, well, forget the title at the moment. What are the activities that you want to be doing? What's the environment that you want to be working in? Who do you, what kind of level? It's not like the job title itself. It can, when you take away the job title itself, you start to get at the good stuff that people really need.
Totally, 100%. And titles also, it's like, if they want a title, then it's like, we'll just go to a smaller company. You might be able to get that title. You know what I mean? Titles are just, so you've got it. But I think that's right to be able to be like, okay, I hear the title is really important to you.
Yeah.
I get it. And can we put the title aside for a second? And let's think about what's behind that. Like, what are you doing day to day? What are you not doing day to day? Like, what gives you joy? What drains you? What plays to your strengths, right?
Yeah. All great questions. Yeah. Love that. Love that. And then I think also for those of you who are in this same situation as Jason, and you have like many, like a whole team of folks where this is the case for, if your company doesn't do an awful lot of career development or people development or L&D, being able to just think a little bit more broadly about, well, how do I like bring my whole team up? Can I compile my own list of resources, videos to watch, classes to take, articles to read? Like, what does that look like? Can I get one person in the team who's particularly good at a particular skill to do a quick 20-minute, seminar for the rest of the team to upskill them as well and show them what great looks like? And that gives that person presentation skills and leadership opportunity. And I mean, you can even set some materials for folks to read or watch in advance of a team meeting, and then set aside 20 to 30 minutes in a team meeting to discuss what everybody's learned in those materials. And then you're really bringing, not only are you having these individual career conversations, but you're bringing the whole team up with you, which is so great. And everybody sort of like gets to learn and skill build. And that really is how you take initiative as a manager to build a truly high performing team, is to care to put these kinds of things together.
Yeah. I also think like, Jason's admirable in the sense that he's like worried about his team and he wants to develop his team, right? But like Jason's also got to take care of himself. And I often find some of these leaders, like they sort of get all these requests from their team and they're a little bit like, what about me? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have a career development. And yet they kind of don't end up taking care of themselves too, right? They're sort of, and I think a way to have that conversation, like, maybe Jason, maybe the next level up is like, the founder or the CEO, whatever, is just, again, to start from a business perspective. Like, it's just like, hey, I've noticed that, like, based on what's happening in the market right now, like, we need this sort of product. Like, we need it, right? And I recognize that there's like no one to do it right now.
Yeah.
And I really want to take that on. I'd love to work on this project. I think I can get it done. Or I figured out a way I can delegate this because this actually marries with some, this other person on my team. This is how they want to grow.
Yeah.
Is that something I could step into, right? As opposed to coming to the CEO or founder and saying, I really want to develop my career. Like, I want to know where my career is growing here.
Yeah.
Like the founder is just like, what do you mean? There is so much to be done here. Like, in your eyes, So I think, I think people have more power than they think they have. They've just got to frame it in a way that's business aligned, that can feel heard, that you're like being helpful, right? So I think that's like my because I just hear this constantly. Oh my gosh, it's like constant, And I think the key thing is like, I bet just break it down, reframe it as like, get to your why, get to like the experiences you want to have and the muscles you want to build, and then go find out where that workout can take place, right? Like, where is there something that the business needs to get done that like might be so outside your job, whatever, it needs to get done, and just go pitch it.
Yeah. That's really just, in a nutshell, figuring out the best way to influence your particular executive or the particular CEO that you're working with.
Solve a business problem.
Yeah. Love it.
Cool.
Well, this, I think, brings us to time for episode number 1. And if you want to unpack a little bit more about what we've discussed further, then let's connect on LinkedIn. Lindsey and my LinkedIn is in the show notes that you can click on there. And you can learn more about how we support people leaders and managers to be the kind of manager they would want to work for at elevateleadership.com, or email us. Please email us your questions, your thoughts, your feedback. We're always delighted to hear from you, and we want to be able to answer questions that are really real for you. So we have an email address which is dearl and l, DEARL and ANDL at elevateleadership.com. And catch you next time on People Are the Worst.
The worst. See you.